Hello, welcome back to the Villa View. It's time for a match preview as Villa travel to Brentford on Saturday at 3 o'clock. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by Dave Reed of Sky Sports News. Dave, how are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I mean, nowadays, just talking about Villa is a complete joy each and every week. Although we were just talking before we came on, and David Spurrier was in the chat early, in the comments early, asking a really good question that I'm not sure either of us have got the knowledge to answer. What tactics will Unai use to defeat Brentford? Where are Brentford vulnerable? I mean, I said in I said on Twitter last weekend, I wish I saw football like Unai Emery because it must be a fascinating place to live, like being able to see football the way he does. Because that was the thing about last week against Newcastle, wasn't it, Dave? That the set game plan against Newcastle, it certainly took me by surprise. It definitely took Newcastle by surprise. And you kind of think now for every game, oh, what's he going to do this week?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to try and give ourselves a little bit of credit because in the preview last week we did kind of say that we might go a little bit more direct and kind of try and lift the ball over their press, and that is ended up kind of how it transpired, and that was where we had our
You
most
said
joy.
that, and I said Dendoncker would play. So
You did. Between us, we've got
we're
it.
expert.
We're at least a quarter of Unai Emery between us.
Yeah, someone said there Emery sees football in 6D. So I think between us, we got to 3D between us, didn't we? But yeah, I guess actually on the Dendoncker front, probably worth sticking with the same team and playing him again. Because again, Brentford are quite a big team, aren't they? A team that are very good at set pieces. I think in a lot of the stats you look at, a lot of the metrics for set pieces, Brentford come out on top. So actually, I mean, I wouldn't change it anyway. So yeah.
I think it makes sense to make an unchanged team. Particularly, I think Unai Emery said earlier today that the injury front is pretty much the same. I
Yeah.
don't think anybody who was injured is going to be available. So really, there's not too many decisions for the manager to make. It would either be to remove Dendoncker and move McGinn inside and bring Bertrand Traore, and that's basically the only decision that he would have to make on the injury front. But given how well everybody played last week, and Dendoncker in particular, I think he ran the most distance of any Villa player in that game against Newcastle last week. Covered a lot of ground, did a lot of the simple things really well, and it'd be difficult to drop in for this game. And in particular, as you say, Brentford very strong at set pieces. And I know that the chat earlier was about where Brentford are, where you can take advantage of Brentford. I think it's probably an easier question to answer where Brentford are strong, because we've mentioned set pieces. I think they've scored the second most goals from set pieces, second highest XG from set pieces. That is where they're strong. They've got long throws as well. Matthias Jensen can launch it in there. They've got other players as well who can take a long throw, and they're going to be very direct. They're going to be very quick, and that's where the game probably is going to be won or lost. Can Villa contain that direct threat on Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, Kevin Schade played last week for Brentford, I believe, in a bit of a change front three alongside him in Mbeumo and Tony. I think they'll probably give that another go because they spent money on him in January. They're going to want to give him some games, and they've kind of introduced him slowly into what they do. But it does feel like a decent time to play them, because a few weeks ago Brentford were ahead of us, and everyone was saying Thomas Frank, manager of the season. We were still stuck in 11th, and this was only about 2-3 weeks ago. Actually, now we're the ones that have got the momentum. We're up the league, and they've lost a few games. And I was just looking at the Athletic and various other things around Brentford before this game. It feels like a bit of the feel good has gone from Brentford. I know there was a piece on the Athletic about them not looking now to not waste the season, and because they've been doing so well, they don't want it to fizzle out and just end up finishing 10th, 11th. So maybe the fact that they've been knocked back a bit in the last few weeks, it will give them a bit of a refocus and make it a harder game. I certainly don't think Thomas Frank will let Brentford be on the beach.
Absolutely not. No. I mean, I've interviewed Thomas Frank a couple of times. He's always very intense, I would say. He's an intense manager, a little bit like Unai Emery, really. Lives and breathes football. He won't be allowing any of his players to finish the seasonal clock off early. And in some ways, Villa have gone under the radar. We talked about this before, but, Villa supposedly have gone under the radar over the last couple of months. And now everybody seems to be talking about Villa. It's kind of reversed the other way for Brentford, who a lot of people were talking about earlier in the season. And their drop-off in form has kind of gone a little bit under the radar this time around. They're not in the best of form at the moment. I think with Brentford, though, you have to talk about it in the context of their whole season. And I don't think they would have expected to be as high as they have been.
No.
And I think if they did finish 10th, in the context of Brentford, that is an amazing achievement to finish mid-table in the Premier League, given the trajectory they've been on over the last few years. So I think, yes, they'll be a little bit concerned about the drop-off in form, but if you look at the bigger picture from Brentford's point of view, and I'm sure Thomas Frank would say the same, that a club like Brentford, if they can finish mid-table in the Premier League, that is regarded as an excellent season.
Yeah, I think their first target would have been to stay up, only their second year back in the Premier League. Obviously, a big player for them last season, the second half of the season that got them up the league was Ericsson. He's not there this time round. So they've had some great results this season. They're one of the few teams that have gone to Manchester City and won. I think they've just had a difficult few weeks. I think they've lost 3 in a row. Now Brentford, they've definitely lost their last 2. Wolves last week, just a bad day at the office. But the thing is, if we're playing Brentford at home, they are a different beast. Even the game they lost at home to Newcastle in that first half, they were very, very strong. Newcastle did well to turn that around in the second half. But in the first half of that game, Brentford really were on Newcastle and played really well. And when they play at home, it is different to playing Brentford at your own place, isn't it? It's one of the harder places to go in the Premier League.
Yeah, it really is. And given the fact they've moved into a new stadium, it's actually a really kind of hard place to go already, straight from Griffin Park to the Gtech. The crowd are close to the pitch there, and they make a real good noise for Brentford. I think they've only lost twice, maybe, is it, at home this season? And they were to big teams, Newcastle, and another team that escapes me. But they're one of the top teams, I think, that they've lost at home to.
Didn't Arsenal win there this season?
Yeah, it might have been them. So yeah, you're right. At home, they are extremely strong, and I think Thomas Frank will be eager to send the team out, ready and raring to go to try and stop Villa from playing their game. I think they'll have a plan for us, and the thing with Thomas Frank is, and something that I really admire, the team that starts the game, he's very good with his substitutions, so that the team that starts the game isn't probably going to be the team and the formation and the shape and everything like that finishes the game. He will tend to make changes early in the second half to give the players enough time to come on and make a difference. And he'll often change formation, change shape, change players from one side of the pitch to the other side of the pitch to try and create a bit of confusion or create that different bit of impact for his team. So he's a really interesting manager, Thomas Frank, and someone who I've got a lot of time for. Really good manager in the Premier League.
They're a fascinating team, Brentford, and they're a good fit. I think that's the main thing with them. That they fit each other perfectly. Thomas Frank and Brentford. They're a unique club, and I would say he's a unique manager as well. They've got a few players that I really like. I really like Rico Henry. Obviously, Tony up front can be unplayable on his day. I think the goalkeeper is one of the best operators in the Premier League. So they've got some really good players. Villa have got some players that have played for Brentford as well. You'd expect Conser and Watkins to both start going up against their old team. How do you think Watkins will find going back there? Because that's probably one of the bigger stories and bigger dialogues going into this game. Watkins is going back there as one of the hottest players in the Premier League.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thomas Frank was on the world feed for one of the games in midweek. So obviously the home broadcasters, Sky, BT, Amazon, have set games for TV, and then the world feed provides live Premier League action for television stations around the world. And Thomas Frank was one of the pundits on the world feed this week, and he was asked a question as to how Ivan Toney and Ollie Watkins compare, because obviously he's worked with both of them. And he was talking about Ollie Watkins having a real presence on the shoulder and that quickness of thought, that the intensity that he goes about his work. Ivan Toney, someone who perhaps he would say has a better link up play than Ollie Watkins. This is what Thomas Frank was saying, and obviously he said, I believe that Ivan Toney is better than Ollie Watkins, but there's no doubt who's in the better form at the moment, and that is Ollie Watkins. And interestingly, Thomas Frank pointed at how good Ollie Watkins is in the air, and we saw that a little bit for the assist against Newcastle last week. I think that's one of his underrated skill set, the fact that he's able to challenge in the air, and he'll have a job on his hands this weekend, because I think Brentford have won the most aerial duels out of any Premier League side.
Ben Mears won the most in the league, hasn't he? He was on Monday Night Football talking to Carragher, and he's a good defender, Ben Mears, and he's very good at defending.
Yeah, they're really strong in the air. They're really tough central defenders if he's alongside Pinnock at the weekend. You know, they're really tough centre halves to play against. So it'll be an interesting test for Ollie Watkins, and I don't think he's had too much sleep. I've heard he's been in the spare room this week. Obviously, he's had a baby, which we should congratulate him on. And his partner has allowed him to sleep in the spare room. So hopefully he's had enough sleep for the weekend.
Yeah, that's the reason you want to be in the spare room. You don't want to be in the spare room for any other reason other than that. It sounds like a mutual agreement, which is good for Ollie Watkins, because he wouldn't want to find himself in the spare room for any other reason. I think Thomas Franks, I think they're pretty level, Tony and Watkins. Tony's definitely started the season better, but probably in the second half of the season, Watkins has obviously been the stronger. So I don't think there's much between those two players, albeit they're very different types of striker. But that's been the main thing with Watkins, is that I think his link-up play is really good and has been all season. I even thought at the start of the season, when he was feeding on scraps under Gerrard, I thought his link-up play was pretty strong. We just weren't scoring goals as a team. The improvement in his game, they're both good adverts for the Championship, actually. Watkins and Tony, two players that have come from the Championship and are now two of the highest scorers in the Premier League. It shows you that there's value to be had down there, and there's players you can pick up. You think of Bowen at West Ham as well. He'd scored a lot of goals for West Ham last season. I always think there's some good value to be had in the Championship, and I don't feel like teams that you expect to be in the top 10, I don't feel like they pick up enough players from the Championship, because there's definitely the talent there.
Yeah, I think it's players from the Championship. It's that kind of acclimatization period that perhaps some teams in the Premier League don't want to spend the time to allow them to maybe get up to speed with the Premier League. But you're right. I mean, Ivan Toney, he was at Newcastle, wasn't he? And then kind of went down through the leagues and has made his way back up and is now an England international. You know, Ollie Watkins, the story, you know, he was out on loan at Western-super-Mare. I think Dean Smith watched him at Western-super-Mare, and their relationship began from there on in, and obviously ended up coming to Villa and working under Dean Smith there. So, I mean, yeah, Ollie Watkins and Ivan Toney perform slightly different roles now. You're right there. They're kind of at a similar level, I would say. But from Brentford's point of view, they look for Ivan Toney really early in their moves, play the ball up to him, long direct balls into him. He's able to bring it down, and then he's got runners off him. And Buemo, Sharda, we talked about with his pace, and then Rico Henry often joins the attack on the left-hand side. Whereas Watkins, I think he's been asked to do a lot of hold-up play, which perhaps isn't his strongest asset. I agree, something that he's improved on. But in the past, I think he's been asked to do a lot of it. Whereas now, I think his game has slightly changed a little bit. He's allowing other players to help progress the ball upfield rather than him dropping deep to get involved. He's very much on the last shoulder of the defender, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, his assist at the weekend shows you about his link-up play. Not many strikers are capable of pulling off an assist like that. That was such a good assist against Newcastle last weekend with his head. And at the moment as well, he's scoring all kinds of goals, right foot, left foot, and headers. He's an absolute joy to watch. I don't know about you, but I've had some pretty miserable nights down at Brentford in the Championship. I remember us getting pumped 3-0 the night we signed Scott Hogan. He didn't play, but we lost 3-0, and Scott Hogan must have been thinking, what on earth have I done here? And I've interviewed players who played in that game, and they were thinking the same. What have I done? What have I walked into here? There was a 1-0 in the Championship where Mopace curled one in the last minute. So I said Brentford hasn't been a happy hunting ground for Villa, but I guess the key thing is that Emery has kind of vanquished all these records. Is that a word? He's vanquished all these records so far. He's beat a lot of bad records that Villa have had. So it's a different Villa heading to Brentford now. I mean, we've stole so many of their players and their manager over the years, and they've still been better than us. Finally, it feels like we might be better than them.
I know, you're right. Yeah, we've had some horrors, haven't we, against Brentford? That Mopé one, for some reason, sticks in my mind. I don't actually live too far from the Brentford ground, so I ended up going to quite a lot of those games, and the Mopé one sticks in my mind just because it was so miserable at the end.
Horrible night.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, hopefully we're in. Well, we are. There's no hopefully about it. We're in a better place now than we have been in a long time. So, and as we kind of seen, I think Emery said today, Brentford is a difficult place to go, but he doesn't want his team kind of looking back too much on the successes that they've had. It's kind of analyse the game, move on, and let's concentrate on a plan to try and turn Brentford over on Saturday.
Yeah, it's impossible for us to try and predict what Emery's going to do, because that plan last week was just so varied and so different to what had gone previously, where the build-up was quite slow at times, purposefully. He was very slow in some of the other home games. Last week it was just absolute full throttle, getting Newcastle's faces. I suspect it will be somewhere in between the two in this one. But it'll be another interesting game, and it'll be another great one, hopefully, for the Villa fans that are there to enjoy. Let's finish with a score prediction then, Dave Reid. What are you saying?
Yeah, tough one this week. I don't. You want to obviously give Villa the edge, but there's also in the back of your mind, at some point the run will end. Let's hope it's not on Saturday. I'm going to continue to back Villa. So let's go for a 2-1. But you're right. I think it's going to be an interesting mix-up in how we play at the weekend. I think Brentford will try and have a plan to stop us playing out from the back. But then once we're able to get by their kind of early press, they'll sit back and sit compact in their shape. So it'll be up to us to then try and break them down, and then they'll obviously be trying to hit Tony and hit the runners on the counter attack quickly. So I think it'll be an interesting game, but I think 2-1 is going to be my prediction.
Yeah, that's where the goalkeeper is really good, because his distribution is absolutely superb. It sounds stupid to say, but actually the goalkeeper and the centre forward link up quite well for Brentford. I'm going to go 2-1 to Villa as well. Incidentally, the last time we didn't win a game, I think, was in London when we went to West Ham. So, that was the last time Villa didn't win a football match, was when they travelled to London. But you got to fancy us at the moment. I think I predicted us to draw last week, but I'm going on all the other shows that I do. I've predicted us to win 2-1, so I'm gonna stick with that. Dave Reid, enjoying having you on these previews. Thanks ever so much for joining me, and thanks to the people watching in the live chat and the people that will go on and watch this video as well. And wherever you're watching or listening to the Villa View, subscribe, get your post notifications on, like the video, comment, all that jazz, and that really, really helps us. I'll be on again tonight with Stato. I think we're looking to go on around 8:45, so watch out for that. He'll go through all the weird and wonderful stats in the lead up to the Brentford game with myself. Thank you to Adam for producing. Thanks to Luke Roper for continuing to sponsor us. Use our code TVV20 and you'll get 20% off everything they have to offer. For those of you that are going to watch later, I'll see you in a few hours. And as always, up the Villa.